Okay, so I think for the purposes of time, as we haven't got that long, we'll make a start. So welcome to this masterclass on circular economy implementation. My name is Fiona Charnley, and as you all know, if you watched this morning's presentation, I'm an Associate Professor of Circular Economy at the University of Exeter and co-director of the University's Centre for the Circular Economy. And I'm joined today by Merryn Haynes-Gadd. I'll hand over to Merryn to briefly introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm a research fellow at the Exeter Centre for Circular Economy, and I was one of the co-authors who helped develop this guide with PA Consulting.
Brilliant, thanks Merryn. So in this 20-minute or 25-minute masterclass, we are going to introduce you to a tool that has been developed by ourselves at the University of Exeter in collaboration with PA Consulting and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. We've, as I mentioned this morning in my talk, we've undertaken a lot of work with businesses who are looking to implement circular economy. The circular economy has grown significantly in interest over the last 10 years, but particularly over the last 2 to 5 years, with international governments putting it at the heart of their strategy and businesses using circular economy principles as a key way to innovate. And as I mentioned this morning, there's often a misconception that circular economy is all about waste in terms of garbage, whereas actually we like to think about it, or authors propose that actually the circular economy helps us to think about wasted value in terms of how we can create and capture new value from existing systems. And so in our work with many different organisations, national, international, large and small, what we found was that businesses are starting to implement circular economy and are very interested in implementing it, but often it's very difficult to know where to start. There's a number of different business models that have arisen. Some of those look at replacing materials with alternative materials. Some of those business models look at extending product life cycle, and then others look at the end of life or end of useful life. But often it's difficult to know which business models are most appropriate for your business and your type of product, because there isn't one size fits all solution. So what we did with PA Consulting and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was looked into these business models and developed a tool to help organisations identify where added value can be gained from implementing circular economy principles. So we have tested the tool with a number of different organisations as shown on this slide, and we've got some fantastic feedback demonstrating that the tool can in fact be applied to many differing organisations. The purpose of the guide itself is to help businesses explore and design circular business models, as I mentioned, and importantly, it's a practical guide to help businesses to navigate circular economy opportunities, and particularly developing new products, services and business models. So who is it for? It's for any business. It's been purposely designed for any business or from any sector wanting to understand how they can create, deliver and capture value from circular economy. And it's a sequential guide. So it offers a number of different tools that we'll explain in just a minute to help businesses navigate and move through the different steps to implement circular economy thinking. So as I mentioned, the circular economy is a value-led approach, and it encourages us to think about how value is created and delivered, not just in one direction from producer to consumer, but actually it's about developing a network of interrelationships between different producers across the supply and value chain and different consumers at any one time. So as I mentioned, the guide is split into a number of different tools that we're going to take you through sequentially. First of all, tool number 1 highlights where to play. So helping your business to identify where circular business opportunities lie. Once you've identified that opportunities, the next 3 tools help you to explore that opportunity in more detail. So the second element is how to win, so how you can create circular value propositions for your business. How to operate, so identifying circular capabilities that you need or you might already have within your business. And then importantly, finally, how to profit, so how to select the most appropriate circular pricing strategy. And importantly, all of these tools are underpinned by a continuous cycle of iterative feedback to help you to understand and assess the feasibility of applying circular economy within your business. Essentially, how will it work and is it going to be effective for your business? So we start at the beginning of the guide with an assessment for your business to understand where the opportunity can be, and importantly, how to assess your business against your current practice. So what you're already doing and what are the opportunities that can be gained through the different steps of the guide. So as I mentioned, the masterclass is only short, so we're going to give you a whistle-stop tour of the different tools. But importantly, we're going to give you the link at the end of the session today so that you can actually go and download the PDF and then experiment with it and use it within your business. And Merrin and I are both more than happy for you to get in touch if you need any support or have any questions about any element of using the guide. So I'm going to hand over to Merrin now, who's going to talk us through the different stages of the guide using a worked up case example.
Great, thank you, Fiona. So yes, apologies if I speak a little bit fast, but there's a lot to get through in a short space of time. So I'm going to go into more detail and work through this case study example. So this first section, where to play, is very much about identifying that kind of circular business model opportunity, and this section has 3 different tools to it. Tool A is about sort of mapping the existing flow of value and understanding what value exists within your system or your network. Tool B is about considering where might value be lost within your system or network, or could there be any value that is at risk. And then step C is about sort of identifying what those circular value opportunities are and thinking about ways in which we can sort of close some of these loops to recover some of this value. Next slide. So with this, this is one of the templates that you have as part of the guide. And if we were sort of to use an example of a fashion and textiles manufacturer, when they go and start using this tool, what we ask them to think about first is sort of what are the key stages of their value chain or of their system. So for this sort of manufacturer, it'd be sort of resources through to end of life. And then what we ask them to do is to map out all the different value across their system and think about and separate these in terms of value that they control and manage versus value that they don't control and manage. So examples of value that they don't manage would be, say, packaging that is handled by a waste supplier, or perhaps their sort of product is the kind of thing that ends up in landfill. Whereas data that they would control and manage would say the data that they capture on their customers at point of sale. And so what we ask them to do is to really think about all the different kind of value that exists within your system at this point, not just economic value, but kind of resource value. So this is your products, your materials, your waste streams, your operations, your people, anything inside your network or system that has a form of value. We also like you to think about sort of your consumer value. So what is the value that you're providing to your customer through your product or your service? Also, it's important to think about, what is the relationship value within your network? Who are your key partners that you already have, and how does that leverage the network? And then lastly, thinking about kind of data value. So, you capture data on your product or your customers, and what do you do with that? And so once you've mapped all the flow of value across your system, then you move on to step B, which is very much about sort of looking and understanding where or there might be lost value within your system or your network. So you look at that system map that you've created, and then you look for all the points within this system where there might be value that is being lost or potentially at risk due to something like a pandemic or regulation changes, for example. And so these are a few examples of the types of value that you might find that could be lost. So, B2B packaging is only single use and is getting disposed. And so what is important about this step is that this isn't just about kind of understanding where the value is lost or at risk, but also prioritizing. So it's good to try and think about quantifying some of this lost or at risk value so you can see where the biggest sort of gains can be made. So once you've got your sort of prioritized list of value, then you move on to step C, which is where you're looking at sort of identifying those circular value propositions. So you take your list and then you look back over your system network from resources through to end of life. And you look to sort of the typical circular business models. So things like product lifetime extension or circular supplies or things like sharing platforms. And you use this as sort of like an inspiration for trying to identify ways in which you might be able to create or close loops to recover some of this lost value, maybe maximize existing value, or perhaps conserve some of this value that might be at risk. And what we want people to do is to put these sort of ideas down in the bottom of the template here. So these are sort of two examples of kind of initiatives that you can think about, which might be able to recover some of this lost value. But while you're doing it, we also think it's important for you to think about, what is the type of value that you're generating and who is benefiting from this value? Because in the circular economy, it's important to have this sort of multi-stakeholder perspective, not just economic value, but environmental value, but also social value as well. And so these are sort of just examples of the kind of ideas that you can come up with using this template. But the idea is to just come up with as many ideas as possible. So that's section 1. And so moving on to section 2, how to win. And so this step is very much about understanding how we can really create value for your customers and your key partner through your circular initiative. And one of the key things about this section that we thought important to highlight is the idea of collaboration. And as Fiona mentioned, within a linear system, relationships tend to be quite transactional. And so, but in order to make a circular economy really work and operate, you need to create these richer relationships that are built on mutual benefits. So that's how section tool A and B helps you to do this. So A is about identifying those sort of who are those key customers and partners that I need to make my idea work. And step B is then about defining that really intrinsic, mutually beneficial circular value proposition. So moving on to the first tool A, if we were to explore one of those examples from step 1, so the rental scheme, we think about who are all the partners I need to make this idea work. So I need an online platform provider, I need sort of a courier service, I probably need a partner to sort of help me wash and sort my clothes. And then once you've listed all the possible partners you might need, including your key customers, then you want to be thinking about how critical will this person be for the success of the idea, rating this from sort of high, medium to low. And so once then you've identified your key customers, then you move on to the next stage, which is tool B. And this is about defining that mutually beneficial circular value proposition. So using this template, if we were to say, take our partner organization who are sort of dry cleaners or laundrettes, what we do is we go through each of these sections of this template and answer these questions from your own perspective as an organization, but also from the perspective of your partner. So if you were to take one of the first questions around needs, what are the needs of dry cleaners at the moment? In cities, they need more business because people aren't going to work in the same way that they used to. And for me, I need someone to sort of sort and inspect and wash my inventory. So think about the offer, we're offering them new revenue streams and reliable contracts, and they're offering us the ability to support our distribution network and the rental of our clothes. And so essentially you just go through that template and answer all of these questions. But you can also use this to think about your key customer as well and really define what that sort of that value proposition is for your consumer as well, as they are also sort of one of the main key partners of your system. Moving on to the next section, how to operate. So this is about sort of understanding what are the capabilities I need as an organization in order to make my circular idea and business model work. And so business capabilities are very much the tasks that you need to perform as an organization to make your operating model work. So moving on to the next slide, as part of the guide, from analysing sort of different case studies of businesses, we sort of identified a few sort of key circular operating capabilities that we think organizations need if they were to implement some of these sort of circular business models. This is available at the back of the guide. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a list that can be useful to sort of prompt a few ideas if you're thinking about sort of the capabilities you might need. But moving on to the next slide, this is this sort of template. This is the tool that we use to think about for your new circular idea. So following the closed rental service, what we asked the company to do is think about what are all the key stages of this new initiative. So for this, it would be sort of source clothing, matching clothing, distribution, and then refurbish and repack the clothes. And then what we need to do is think about what all the different capabilities are under each of these different phases. And so a few of these might be sort of supply management, sort of consumer insight, and then through into refurbish and repack, it'll be stuff to do with product repair and refurbishing. And so what we do after you've sort of thought about all the different stages of that capability, what's important is also to then use a sort of quick traffic light system from sort of red down through to green, and sort of assess how ready you are within that sort of capability. So if in terms of like supplier management, and that was classified as red, that is, we don't do that, we have no idea how to do that, that's something we'd have to start doing. Whereas green is, yeah, we're ready to go tomorrow type thing. And so what's important about this step as well is that if you've decided that as part of this new initiative, you don't want to build this capability inside your company, this is where you might consider partnering with another organization. So then you'd go and hop back into step 2 and think about who are the partners I need and how can I sort of find a new partnership to help me meet that capability within my operation. So then lastly, moving on to the last section, how to profit. So this is about helping define, what is that pricing strategy that I need to make this, this new initiative sort of financially sustainable. And so this consists of one tool, which essentially is another template, which helps us to identify what are the key kind of factors I need to know about building my pricing strategy. So moving on to the next slide, you can see this is the template that we've laid out. And if we were going to sort of follow with the example, the first question is sort of, is this something about paying for access, or is this something about paying for ownership? So for us, it's about paying for access. And so then after you've decided, what is the best model, then you go through each of these questions. And I think what's interesting about these questions is that these might not be things that you know right away. You might have to go out and do some research. You might need to do some consumer research, maybe some market research, but these will be some factors that you will need to think about when defining your strategy. So, the first one talks about benefits, benefits to your customer. And then the second question, how will you capture and report non-financial value? This allows you to think about, what is the other kinds of value? What are the societal value, the environmental value that this sort of idea might give to the organization, but to the whole system, and how can I measure that? And so moving on to the last few slides, this is supporting material that's available with the guide. A lot of this is built on some research that Fiona and I have done over the last few years, as well as lots of other work that's been done by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And so in this supporting material, it sort of point you to more towards kind of background knowledge and information. And the next slide is just sort of an example of what that looks like when you're going through the guide. And so moving on to the last slide, this is the link where you'll be able to download the guide. We launched it December last year. I think it's had over 1,000 downloads by now. And as Fiona said, very happy to discuss the guide in any more detail. And if you've got any questions now, we're happy to answer them.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks, Marion, for taking us through that. And as you mentioned, it's a bit of a whistle-stop tour due to the time constraint. Normally, we would spend at least an hour, probably only on tool 1 with a company, working through all of the different elements. But hopefully, it's given you an idea of what the guide is for, the different steps, and how it can be potentially useful if you are part of a business that's considering adopting circular economy, or even if you have started but you want to kind of explore other options or investigate it in a bit more detail. So if anyone has any questions, I think we've got a little bit of time left, so please feel free to come onto the mic or on the camera, or to type into the chat. 2 minutes remaining. Marion, you've used this guide with lots of different businesses now. How have you kind of found their experience, and is there much of a difference between kind of different sectors or sizes of business?
Different. I think one of the interesting reflections that we've had from a few different people is they're not entirely sure, if you're a large organization, they're not entirely sure who to have in the room when doing some of these tools. So some of the big companies like Siemens, it would be sort of one team within one department who might be sort of trying to understand their product system. And they might think about needing to pull in some different people from around the company to do it. Whereas if it's with a smaller organization, you only need, a few people, and they'll have the overview of everything. So I think that's been an interesting reflection, and something to worth thinking about depending on the size.
Yeah, brilliant. And someone asked earlier if the slides will be made available, and yeah, we're happy to make the slides available after the session. And obviously you can download the guide here.
I think you've got some questions.
Yeah, so one question from Vicky. We're an eco-based hospitality micro business. Do you use the same manufacturing?
Yes, I think we've It's so a lot of the people we've used this with have predominantly been manufacturing firms, but they are also firms that do offer services in what they do as well. And I think that's the way in which we designed the toolkit, is that it is flexible enough for you to put your own system within it. You know, we kept it quite not generic, but sort of structured enough that if you sort of wanted to apply it to your own thing, you could.
Brilliant. And Lloyd, I don't know whether you had a question.
Yes, I did. Thank you, Fiona. I just wondered if when you've been working with implementing these fantastic sort of future-based approaches, although they need to be now rather than in the future, when you, within the finance supply chain, experience any challenges or issues or